What is up? What is up, everybody? So, our wonderful host Shayla is not here today.
Shay.
I'm standing in. I'm filling in the gap. Shay, everybody, just make sure you keep her in your thoughts. She is stranded out of state right now in a storm in Texas. So,
Damn.
um, no, what'd you say,
Most
Theo?
future generations, we got to talk about climate one of these episodes. That ain't the
Well,
most
we will.
climate opinion right there.
Right, we will talk about climate in one of these episodes. In the meanwhile, I am going to graciously step in for Shay and say welcome to Seven Generations Black. This is the podcast featuring Theo EJ Wilson, Lethal, H Soul.
Did we discuss you becoming the de facto host? Like, was that a democratic process? How did you end up?
Mm-hmm.
It just happened.
I'm talking shit. You can have it.
And I'm your girl, Jice Johnson. This is normally hosted by Shay J. Due to the effects of the coronavirus and COVID-19 global pandemic and the catastrophic effects that are sure to last for generations to come, we are collaborating to equip and inform our community on how to navigate personal and community-based decisions through a 7-generational lens to counter misleading information. We are here in season 4. We are close to the end of this season, and we're getting ready to talk about a couple of things. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Make sure that you hit the share button and thumbs up, hit the like button. We have our super chats over here if you are over on YouTube, but you know what? Giving a thumbs up and a heart and engaging with us is free. So we always ask you to support independent Black media. That is what you are doing when you donate. That is what you are doing when you are engaged. Soul is over here making sure that we are all saged and Palo Santo'd and all of our energies are aligned. That is what's up. Thank you. Today we are going to talk about how we often suffer in silence in our community. I think that as we are, thinking about this as a culture, we have a tendency to keep our business to ourselves. Don't get into my business. I won't get in your business. And while we do have a lot of harmful and silly gossip that can run rampant, when we really need help, we are often suffering in silence. And the data shows that we are suffering from health disparities, mental health disparities, crime, suicide, domestic violence, and so much more. And yet many of these topics are taboo in our community. And so how does carrying around this pain and suffering affect us now and in the future? And so I'm going to kick this off to H Soul. He's been running a series around health. He's been running a series about healing ourselves as a community. H, start us off. How are we suffering in silence?
Yeah, that's a really complex question. Whenever we start talking about this subject in particular, I always want to default to Dr. Joyce DeGruy, who has done a lot of deep work as far as post-traumatic slave syndrome is concerned. And so the first thing that I would always do is reference that book. A lot of us, and Lethal speaks to this quite a bit, a lot of us are in denial about what has happened to us, right? We're in denial about the fact that we are the descendants of people who were enslaved. We're in denial about where we are in relationship to the empire, even right now. And we have not dealt with the internalized trauma that has occurred to us as a people from then till now. And so that's, and I think it was Theo that was breaking that down to us last week. Like, the mind can only take so much, right? Like, it's a heavy piece, right? Like it's a deep and heavy piece. And so my brother Talib has this saying that the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And so Black people really need to engage with their mental health issues. One bite at a time. Pick one, like addiction, father abandonment issues, mother abandonment issues. Like, if you Black, you got something on the menu. Trust and believe. And if you're not clear that you got something on the menu, then you got a whole lot on the menu. And so I would just encourage Black people to really engage in a mental health assessment, right? In a mental health assessment, and begin that process of understanding that we're crazy as fuck, that you got it in your family, I got it in mine. If you fronting like you know, like you got all your shit together, then you one of the worst ones. You're one of the purveyors of it, because, you know, as my man Talib Kweli once said on Reflection Eternal, right now we're like slaves on a ship bragging about who has the flyest chains. And so we really need to engage in that process of healing. And I don't like to use the word self-healing, because no one particularly heals themselves, but we do need to we do have to initiate that process by reaching out for mental and social health supports. That has to become part of the culture.
Go ahead, Theo.
Yeah, so I've been dealing with mental illness since I was 11. For whatever reason, the descendants of Vietnam veterans who have been Agent Orange poisoned have a higher frequency of mental illness, specifically depression. And so that was something that I inherited from one generation to the next. Also, my intellect was bigger than it should have been, because I was just exposed to a lot when I was a kid. And I took on the weight of the world as soon as I began to understand it. And the only thing that really got me through it was, number one, my father. He made it clear that I wasn't about to take them drugs, especially them 90s drugs, man. You know, them things was hell experiment. Kids was fricazine their whole brains out with them 90s drugs, bro. You know what I'm saying? You know, we was fresh out the 80s. You know, half them things had, you know, powerful opioids in them and whatnot. So still do, low key. But Daddy was like, okay, so here's what's not going to happen. You're not going to get on these drugs. What you're going to do is you're going to write. And artistic expression is one of the ways that Black folks, and me specifically, have gotten through our mental health issues. I made sure that I got proficient at being emotionally raw when it came to expressing myself in any of my art forms. I do a few of them, you know what I'm saying? But then you find the healing. And then one of the ways to help your community is to help heal others with your stuff. You need venom to create anti-venom. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's one of the first things. So I made sure, especially with poetry, is, you know, a lot of people process some really dark shit through writing, but I'm not going to share it with nobody until I found the anti-venom. Because I've seen a lot of poets that just was like, we just puking on the front row, wonder why everybody walked off sick. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, you better find a freaking T cell in there and then spread that. And that's how you spread light, and that's how you help. But I had to unpack it for myself, and art was the way to do it.
Yeah, I think we all have. I mean, I think everyone here, at least on this panel, has, you know, addressed a lot of the mental health steps that we've taken, right, to begin to work on healing ourselves. But, you know, when I think about what is happening, or what I see happening, is, one, I want to acknowledge that we are bringing the topic more and more to the forefront. I am hearing it come up. I'm hearing the fact that the Black community needs to address our mental health in ways that I know growing up, it was absolutely not addressed. You know, I remember the first time that I was diagnosed with clinical depression, and my mom was like, oh, no. You just need to go to church, and you just need to praise Jesus harder. You better get in there and do a praise dance, girl. And I was like, no, right? And so I think, you know, that ideology of you don't have this issue, these are not real issues, right? You're not doing something right. You're not praising Jesus hard enough. You're not getting out there doing something right. And we're not going to talk about that. You don't have this problem. I do see that starting to change, but I wonder, for me, how far is that change really going? Because at the same time, that we're addressing the fact that we have more, that we have these mental health issues, and addressing the fact that we have this trauma in our DNA, and starting to bring these things up to the light. We're seeing a higher level of teen suicide in Black teens, right? We're seeing a higher level of, or maybe it's not a higher level, maybe it's just being brought out more that, there is domestic violence issues. Like, we're starting to see these violent acts that are, being brought more to the forefront. And we're starting to see that number rise as we begin to talk more and more about mental health. And I'm not quite sure what that correlation is.
So, what's important to do, though, Jice, and it's okay to call it mental health issues, but this is why I like Dr. Joyce DeGruy work, is that if you're not careful, you will begin to think that there's a problem with you, right? By saying that there's a mental health issue. But when you put it in the vein of post-traumatic slave syndrome, then what you understand is that there was an originating originating trauma that took place that precipitated the particular formation of illness that you're dealing with just in your body. It connects it politically as well as medically to a tradition of trauma that has taken place inside of us. Else what happens is we walk around here thinking that I got mental health. If you listen to what Theo just said, that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. He said that he realized that that he was dealing with the mental health issue at the same time that he realized who he was in the world, right? Those two things came together because then he realized the trauma that his people had endured, and then he took that trauma on. So that's the whole point, is that we can sit down with and understand that that's generally how it can happen. Theo just happened to be awake when that took place. But that is the reality of it, that when Black youth come into the understanding of who they are and how they're treated in the world, that's going to create some mental health issues. And so therefore we have to tie it to the originating trauma so that people don't start to think Black folks is fucked up, like we just came here that way, like we just came here as thugs, like we just came here as people who abuse their husbands and their wives and their mothers and no, there was a ma'afa that took place, and that is where we have to assign our diagnosis so that we're clear of what started it.
And I think to piggyback on that, so when you start to see it as a collective, you start disidentifying with and taking it as personally as you could. You feel me? Like, one of the things that helped me in my mental health journey was not all the way taking it as personally as I could. You see what I'm saying? Because what that does is it puts the onus all on me in terms of the fault, which is different than responsibility. Fault and responsibility are two different beasts, right? Fault is like let's say hypothetically my dad left me, right? That's not my fault, but it is my responsibility to be a good father. It is my responsibility to find my father wound and heal it. You know what I'm saying? Even though it's not my fault that I have one, right? And so I think that one of the first things we have to do is arrest the narrative in our head. It's one of the very first things. And so, like, the narrative came from someplace, your inner voice, like the voice in your head, like mine, I trace mine and it go all the way back to the plantation, man. It really, really does. We speak to ourselves the way overseers spoke to our ancestors. You see what I'm saying? And one of the most important things that I believe we as a community could do, speaking generationally, is watch how we speak to our children. You see what I'm saying? That's one of the most important things. I can't emphasize that enough. When I listened to my dark inner voice, I realized that my capacity to catastrophize and judge came from a generation before me, which came from a generation before them, which came from a generation before. Literally, the first whip is your tongue when it comes to making your child a slave. You understand what I'm saying? And so one of the ways that, I make it clear, you know what I'm saying? Like, I got a little daughter in there. She's learning how to speak, and we don't let our speech burn in anger when we speak to our daughter. You see what I'm saying? That doesn't mean we don't set boundaries with her. That doesn't mean that we, you know what I'm saying, kind of lead her to be soft in this world, you know what I'm saying? But there's ways to do that without psychologically programming her inner voice to sound like a hateful voice, which is how we were spoken to on the plantation. You know what I mean?
Lethal, you jumping in?
Yeah. So I get it, and I understand and respect that when we speak about the culture, the habitualness of suffering in silence, the default is always to go to and focus on and speak about mental health issues and mental health crises. But the culture of suffering in silence goes beyond mental health in our community. You see, some of it is pride and ego. You understand what I'm saying?
Which are
those are mental health issues, though.
Right. I understand that, but it's a different type of mental health issue than the normalized narrative. Right. So, for example, right, needing help paying your rent, for example, right? The need or the righteousness of reporting a crime that you have witnessed, vice the narrative of reporting that crime that you were not involved in, by the way, being interpreted and seen as snitching, comes from two different places, right? They're on opposite polar ends of each other, right? But it's still a choice being made to suffer in silence, right? I can't tell you how many times, you know, I've had examples of brothers and sisters, hell, my own children, my own daughters, being in need of assistance from me, whether it be financial assistance or whether it be the type of assistance that only a father who grew up in the projects of Brooklyn can bring to bear on the situation when they're dealing with these knucklehead motherfuckers out here in these streets. You understand what I'm saying? There is a choice made to suffer in silence, to keep the mouths shut. You see what I'm saying? And while I appreciate the conversation that we're having that we started off with, because that's the one that most resonates, you know, with the culture and our people, I just want to bring to the forefront, put on the table that the culture of suffering in silence extends beyond individuals or groups of people suffering from mental health issues.
So, and that's exactly the point that I'm making, Lethal, when I say that's why it's important to look at Dr. Joyce DeGruy post-traumatic slave syndrome, because she expands it beyond, like what you're saying, I'm depressed, or, you know, I'm dealing with, you know, trauma from my childhood, and she expands it into a political positioning, because part of her remedy is that she has a two-part remedy and that she talks about. One part is that we heal ourselves, and being engaged with getting healing. The second part of our healing is that we have to agitate against the forces that are continuing to engage and to create trauma. So it's, you know, you're not going to go to a regular psychiatrist and a psychiatrist is going to tell you, okay, yeah, you're dealing from depression. You need to organize with about 100 Black men and make sure you're patrolling your streets, because that's going to help you emotionally, psychologically speaking. So that's why I think it's important for us to have African psychologists, people like Amos Wilson, people like sister that wrote the ISIS papers, Frances Cress Welsing, people that have taken a look at this, Anthony Broder, people who address it in more of an Africanized context?
Yeah, when we talked about the here in the DMV, or there in the DMV, because I'm actually in North Carolina right now. But when we talked about this particular topic as it relates to suicide rates amongst our youth, Black youth, we actually approached and had psychologists come out who specialize in an Afrocentric approach, not a Western Europeanized approach, which in my opinion seems to be to medicate and ignore and or alleviate the historicalness of the trauma that has fed into some of the things that you're talking about. So with that, I'm saying that, yeah, we need to be advocates of turning to ourselves. There's a reason why Michael Bloomberg, decided to contribute, donate, whatever you want to call it, $100 million to the medical universities and institutions in HBCUs, because they churn out, 75, 85% of the doctors who look like us. And when we can seek that sort of assistance, whether it be physical, mental, whatever type of health we need, and the person looks like us, there's an increased possible chance that they come from a community where we're familiar with. And so there's that ability that they possess to relate to some of the sources of the issues that we have. Go ahead, Jice. I didn't mean to interrupt, sis.
No, it's all good. I mean, I wanted to just kind of go back to something that you said, because I think that's true. What you were mentioning, just to kind of pull that back again from like specifically dealing with like very clear mental health issues, right? And kind of thinking about the way that we behave in ways that, yes, obviously that ties back to mental health, but some of the ways that we behave that are not very healthy and are not necessarily always apparently mental health issues, right? And I think one of those things is that we will suffer in silence before we come out and ask for help. I am so guilty of that. And I have actually really struggled to try and figure out where does that come from, in terms of why do I struggle with acknowledging or saying to someone that I need help with something, right? And so now, as I am, really kind of, as I've walked through my own journey, right, and then have had to say, I need help, like real help. My own personal situation, I'm a single mom, I have 3 kids. I run 2 businesses. One is in the, very deeply ingrained in the community. And when I'm working, in the midst of trying to homeschool children, in the midst of dealing with a teenager and a toddler, which oddly act very similar, and then also thinking about like what it looks like to try and build a business, right? And so, just a couple of years ago, and I've talked about this, and at some point, whenever I really get around to just talking about my story, I really want to talk about, like, I got myself deep into like 80 grand worth of debt over the last couple of years, trying to stand up this organization on my own, having members of the organization, members of the community do bullshit, trying to, figure out how to keep a family together that obviously didn't stay together, and just the like, and what it looked like over the last couple of years to literally dig and crawl my way out of $80,000 worth of debt, and doing so on the consumer side, but still finally coming around to the fact that I owe my parents, right? But when I got to the place of owing my parents, it was because I had already dug such a deep hole. And the first thing my dad said was like, well, honey, why didn't you say you needed some help? And and to this day, I don't have an answer for that, right? So like, what is the process of us feeling like, and I think this kind of goes back to one of the earlier topics that we discussed, where internally we have this rat race for who's got it worse, who's done, who's been, the most, who's been, the poorest, who's been in the most violent situations, who's been, in all these situations that are negative, and we go after fighting for them so much that it's like we need to show that we've done it on our own. We are an army of one. We have, you know, came and conquered, right? And so where I stand today, which is far from removed from that situation today, and I've got all types of great accolades. I was able to hold on to my rental property through all that. I was able to hold on to my car. I never filed bankruptcy. I just got down there and grind, and you know, and it was in the grind. But I finally had to accept help from people saying, "Let me help you with your kids. Let me help you figure this out. Let me help you move this around." In order to get there. Why is that so difficult for us? Why is that taboo for us to ask for help?
For one word, and it's alarmingly simple, and it's taboo because it's true. It's shame. It's my public image versus my private reality. You know, and one of the things that Dr. Amos Wilson talks about is the bigger the gulf between your public image and your private reality, the more dysfunctional you act, period. Doesn't matter what it is. And it just depends the arena. So, you know, you are somebody who has a brand, and that brand is self-help. That brand is self-sufficiency. That brand is, I got this shit. I am a powerful woman.
Let me change that brand. Let me publicly say we're going to change that brand.
Right.
I don't want that to be the brand.
Right, but it's just, you know, I always told you one of the most capable people I've ever met. And it's so like, then you have suffered from what's called the golden shadow. And the golden shadow is the thing that is a virtue on the wrong end becomes a vice, right? So, you know, the fact that somebody projects a strong image is one of the reasons why you'll never freaking be public about exposing that. Think about it. Why would anybody suffer in silence? It's because bringing it to light is something that makes you feel like you're embarrassed. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's all very simple and it becomes extremely complex. And in the complexities, we get lost in the weeds. But the fact is that, like, the reason why I kept shit quiet is because I had an image, you know what I'm saying? And I want niggas to believe that shit because sometimes I got money riding on it. You know what I mean? But the bottom line, right? But the bottom line is, like, I don't be having hella answers, and people be like, "Yo, Theo be having the answers," and I'll be like, "I ain't got this one though. I'm just going like chill." You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and like for example, like I got this social media following. Like, there's two things, right? In one way, you know, suffering in silence makes you, you know what I'm saying, suffer worse. But in another way, like one of the reasons why I kept my shit to myself is because I don't want to throw blood in the water for the sharks that's after me too. You feel me? Yeah. Like sometimes if you throw blood in the water, you know what I'm saying, you know, somebody will come after it and use that against you later. So navigating that, be making people be quiet.
I think it's important to understand though that, and I think we're using a misnomer and we might want to shift this a little bit. Nobody, especially Black folks, suffer in silence. What I mean by that is all you got to do is go to a club on a Saturday night in the hood and let some irk and jerk hit the scene, and you will find out that we are not suffering in silence. In fact, we are enacting out and are loud about our suffering. We just don't recognize it as suffering. We don't recognize it as pain. We don't recognize it as that because when it's coming out as music. It's coming out as, you know, hitting. Yeah, it's coming out as I cussed that motherfucker out. It's coming out as broken up relationships. It's coming out as all, but we do not. Now, the Asians, they suffer in silence more so than what we be considered suffering in silence. We act the fuck up at the movie. I couldn't even go to the movies in the fucking 80s and the 90s.
Real shit.
You couldn't go to the movies because Black folks ain't about to suffer in silence. If I'm suffering, then your ass is about to catch 3 caps over here at this flick too, right?
I got problems. Now everybody on my block.
Everybody got problems. That's the part that I want us to be very clear about, that what we are looking at, even within the so-called woke community, even inside the so-called activist community, where there's infighting and people are beefing and people are going at it with each other, that's suffering, and it's not silent, right? And so we need to, what you're talking about is more so what Theo is talking about as far as the shame, and then you don't talk about what your needs are. But your silence, I mean, your suffering is not silent at all. What your issues are is silent, but the suffering is not silent.
Yeah, I don't disagree on that, but what I want to bring to the table is this, right? When we talk about the source of some of these issues we have in our community, right? We oftentimes talk about or go back to or link it historically to remnants, effect, impact, lingering, et cetera, of slavery. But one of the things that I think is important to do and to point out is, who are we told to bring our griefs to bear? To whom are we told to bring our griefs to bear? And who is this friend we have in
Jesus?
Y'all understand what I'm saying?
Jesus.
Right?
Lay it at the foot of the cross.
So from a historical perspective, right? When you are a people who are consistently told, right, to prostrate yourself on your knees in prayer and bring your sins and griefs to bear to this friend we have in, y'all know who he is, right? So I think
say his name, Lethal, say his name.
Fuck that. I think that has a role to play in what we see manifested today. You understand what I'm saying? Because for generations, right, put it this way, it's only been recent, right, as we've gotten further and further away from ground zero is what we'll call it, right? And what you notice is that as the ripples go further out away from the source of the ripple, it becomes weaker, less noticeable, right? And so, you know, to that, I simply say, we cannot overlook the impact of one of, in my opinion, the most influential aspects of Black life in the world today, and that is the church, who teaches us not to talk to each other, not to come to each other, but to go to the church, to go to your knees, to go to your pastor, your deacons, and your mothers and your elders in the church. Nobody gonna say amen?
Also, the church does also talk about this level of self-sufficiency, and I think that's another, you know, aspect of it, right? Like if things are going wrong in your life, you must be the cause, right? You must not be praying hard enough. You must have sin, you know, somewhere. You must have whatever these issues are. So when you do go to the church, they do not like to address. I can't deal with y'all today. I can't deal with y'all.
To kill,
but you know, and I think that goes back to this, you know, where does the ideology come from that we have to be so strong all the time? And so to your point, H, like I would agree that there are so many ways that we are acting out our trauma and acting out our issues, but never in a way that is healthy and never in a way that actually yields to getting help, right? And it's that idea that misery loves company, or if I'm hurting, you gonna hurt, somebody else is gonna be in pain. And so it's this constant perpetual cycle. So I do feel like it's still a suffering in silence, because it's never in a way that brings about how do we come to a place of healing. It's about causing more pain and more issues and more frustration, because I'm frustrated. I don't know how to voice that. I don't know how to get help for that. I don't even know what this is. I don't even have a name for it, right? I can't even recall at what point I realized that there were names for the things that I was going through and names for the things that I was suffering with or struggling with, that for years I couldn't even put a name to it. It was just like, well, this just sucks. Like life is horrible, but not knowing that there's an actual, you know, word to call it so that we could go and begin, you know, either the process for healing or the process for help. So, you know, I would still say, you know, that it is still a suffering in silence, and it is so many places, because even if we look at how some of those things are being acted out, there are all those things, like so many of the topics are just taboo. We don't talk about suicide. Somebody said the suicide rate isn't higher, statistically higher. It's just being brought to the media more. I challenge that. I would love to find out where we're not seeing arise statistically,
Oh,
but
yeah, absolutely. We're absolutely
I
saying
think
that.
it's
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
but in that space, like, we don't talk about suicide, we don't talk about domestic violence until it's domestic violence month, but domestic violence happen in 12 months of the year. And so why are we waiting when we are seeing either our brothers or our sisters or our children being abused?
Jice, check it out. Autobiography of Frederick Douglass has a very, very interesting take on this, because he talks about the merciless life of the enslaved, how there was never an excuse. There was never there was never, I'm hurting. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He said you could judge. He said you could judge the cruelty of the master by the beauty of the plantation.
Ooh.
It was a direct correlation, right?
Oh.
And what he says is that there was little to no yield when it came to what was expected of you. How would we not inherit that? The brutal, no, walk it off, nigga, you fine. Ain't nothing wrong with you. How would we not inherit that language, that internal dialogue, right? In a world that is merciless, I was doing in Muskegon, Michigan, a talk about generational trauma. And I said that one of the reasons why our parents traumatize us, one of the reasons why they're extra hard on us, is because they know that the world will not be soft on us, at least the world that they know. You see what I'm saying? I know for a fact one of the reasons why my pops was so hard on me is because when I got older and I challenged him on what the fuck was going on, he said, listen, either I kick your ass or the police will. What's it going to be? Right? And at that point in time, I was like, that's fucked up. I'm still reeling from the scars. But the bottom line is, Dad knew that he would stop before I died and that the police would not. You see what I'm saying? And so either way, I see what he was trying to do, and any other excess I forgive him for. But it's very real that we do these things to try to protect ourselves from a world that doesn't give a shit if we open up about our pain.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so if that's not factored into your analysis and where we got that from, the cruelty of walk it off, slave.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Shit about what you're feeling, walk it off. Then we're not really seeing the full breadth of what that means and how it's playing out.
And I think that's uniquely.
I want to say from the 1916 trials popped up, or the 1916 or 1619 project. There was a story I read in the 1619 project, which I don't even like to talk about because it was so gruesome in the story. I was like, I don't watch nothing, don't do. But what you were just talking about, that mentality of get up and walk it off, you're good, you're fine, right? And especially how we do our boys in particular. We are definitely in that space with our boys. We do not let our boys cry. We will not let our boys show emotion. And that just triggered a thought about that story that was so gruesome, to me. A recount of a 10-year-old boy who basically had his eye kicked out and was basically told, like, get up. And so he was saying how he was holding his eye together for the rest of the day, his eye out his socket, until that night when, the rest in his hut could try to help him put his eye back in. And I was like, and it just, I'm sorry, that just.
And we have to be clear that the greater system treats us that way as well, and that's been shown. That's been statistically shown that when you take a Black person and they go to the hospital, they're less likely to get pain meds. They're less likely to get because it's in the white psyche, which is why we got it in the first place, that Black people are these magical green mile human beings that can take a certain level of pain and abuse because it served their own psyche. Because if they thought that we were as equally as human as they were, then they couldn't reconcile treating us the way that they treated us. So they had to make us magically able to take and endure these type of things. And so that even exists in the greater society as of 2021, that we exist in, that they think that we could take a higher level of pain, and we've just internalized that. I want to give a shout out to this sister, Nija Sadiq. She's in the chat room. firing it up. First of all, she called Jesus Devontae Christ. I didn't know Jesus's middle name until I saw it here in the chat room. Devontae. It all makes sense. Jesus Devontae Christ.
Jesus with the six pack.
I'm
man.
done with y'all.
Yo, get us back on track.
Listen, y'all give us a thumbs up. Go ahead and share this out. We're gonna transition over to what Lethal was getting ready to say before before I rudely interrupted him. What were you getting ready to say?
All I was gonna say was that Soul is right? I think that it is a more so well, here in America, here in this country, here in this land. I don't know about any other lands. I never lived in any other land. I live here. I see what Theo was talking about, right, with regards to the whole, get your ass up and get back to work. I see it manifested from my time in the military. You know what I'm saying? Those of us who served in the military, who've gone to sit call for some of the most serious issues, know that they have no problem taking a fucking 800 to 1600 milligram Motrin horse pill, shoving that shit down your throat, maybe giving you a day off, but you got to get your ass back to work. You understand what I'm saying? The maximum amount of time they give you is what? 72 hours, quarters. Anything above and beyond that, your ass got to basically be going up some fucking, surgery, or take your own leave time off, or go into the hole and whatnot. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm only linking it to and I'm only linking it to Europeanism, right? Because I mean, hell, they are the dominant majority, right? And they established the institutions governing the military and whatnot, right? They established the government, right? It's their politics. You understand what I'm saying? And so I see the bleed over, you understand what I'm saying, from my time in the military. And as I said, anyone who ever served, can tell you that anytime you go to the fucking, orthodontist, notice I said orthodontist, not a dentist, orthodontist, and the motherfuckers take 4 of your goddamn wisdom teeth out at one time, and then in 72 hours, your ass is expected to be back on that line at work. That's some goddamn, hey, nigga, get your ass back to work type shit from slave type shit. You understand what I'm saying?
It also explains the high. It also explains the high suicide rate that the military has too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's a great point you're making.
For sure. I mean, literally, a lot of the black spike in suicide is coming from black vets who got poverty drafted into service in the fucking war. That I know that my grandpa had something that these new vets don't have, and that is the faith that they did the right thing. You know what I'm saying? Like when you fought Hitler, you knew that you were defeating a great evil. So when the flashbacks come, when the dark nights of the soul arise, you can take heart that I shot a motherfucker in an enemy uniform. These new boys be like, I shot somebody who was holding a kid. You know what I'm saying? And that's just harder to live with. You understand what I'm saying? I know that because these with my homies who are my peers and younger, like my brother who served in Fallujah. You feel me? The shit that his homies are killing themselves over. Feel me? And my brother's 7 years my junior. I don't even talk about my brother that much. A lot of people don't even know that I have a brother. You know what I'm saying? And like, it's just, this is what's going on. And so
you saying you suffering in silence?
I'm saying that these cats, me or like him?
No, you.
Why don't we know you got a brother?
What you're describing in the context of the topic is Theo J. Wilson suffering in silence.
Yeah, I mean, I've known suffering in silence since I was 10, yo. You feel me? Like this shit came early. You know what I mean? It's so familiar with me. And so one of the great gifts that I got when I decided not to kill myself was talking people off the ledge when they was about to do the same thing and finding the toolkit to do so in the darkness. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I've been to the edge several times of my life, and niggas wouldn't have known why. You feel me? Like niggas had just it had just been looked like a up and die. Like this nigga just did what? You know what I'm saying? But when I had people in my life like, yo, I don't know what to do with this darkness, I got the tools now. You know what I'm saying? Which gives me purpose. And Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. One of the things that helped him made it through the Nazi death camps was purpose. Purpose. You feel me? And so I think that's gonna. I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. This is our mindset moment time.
I was just about to say that sounds like a mindset moment to me.
Right. So I'll lead off the mindset moment with purpose is the thing that makes the suffering worth it. And the good thing is that that's in your hands. You get to define what purpose is for you, and you get to make the outcome that you like, even if, you know, all your hands are tied and there doesn't look like there's no way out. Purpose is the key to resilience, because one of the things that we do have is resilience. We just have to have healthy resilience, because that walking off shit is a form of resilience. It really is. And motherfuckers who have that shit can be very helpful at times. You know what I'm saying? Like niggas who got that walking off mentality will put shit in perspective for your monkey ass real quick, bro. You know what I'm saying? But then past that point, how do we become resilient in a healthy way? You know what I'm saying? And I think that once we have that, we will be the masters of our fate and break generational curses and still pass on generational strength.
Yeah.
Go ahead, H.
Yeah. So I want to bring Lethal's point back forward here, in that when we're talking about mental health, I think it's important that we either talk about post-traumatic slave syndrome or we talk about Black mental health, because it is its own particular historical
category, nigga. Real shit.
Point blank. And so we have to be okay, and I'll end this the way that I started it. We have to begin to popularize our health, mental, physical, spiritual, like popularize it, and don't do it in the way, again, to Lethal's point, where it's where when we're talking about mental health the way that, you know, Becky and Karen are talking about mental health, right? We're talking about mental health as it's connected to our community. We're talking about our mental health as it's connected to oppression. We're talking about our mental health as it's connected to 400 and plus years of, like, connected to our ancestors, connected to our that's the context. And in that way, we will have the courage to bring that forward and create a culture where it's okay and safe to bring that forward. Because oh my, wow. Okay, I'm done. That was beautiful.
Yeah. So I'm glad he did that. I'm glad Theo did that, right?
Yeah.
Because when we talk about purpose, and when we talk about trauma from handed down to us through our ancestors, right, and our elders, it brings me to legacy. I'm here in North Carolina visiting my newborn granddaughter, right? Grandchild number 6, granddaughter number 4. You understand what I'm saying? Newborn granddaughter is actually the sister of my oldest grandchild, my granddaughter, TT, baby T, Tiana. You see what I'm saying? But I am, as to Soul's point before we came on the air, right? 3 generations, right? So myself, my daughters, my granddaughters, right? And before I leave, since my oldest grandchild is 9, I may be blessed with an opportunity to be the first living great-grandfather in my family. First living great-grandfather in my family. But in that role, I can say that I actually know my great-grandmother. Like, I actually know her. You know, she used to feed me, clothe me, along with my grandmother and my mother. And so if you're doing the math, right, my great grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, myself, my daughter, my granddaughter, and a potential great grandchild, that's 7 generations. You see what I'm saying? But I know that my great grandmother wasn't thinking about my great grandchild. And so participating in this 7 Generations Black has kind of opened my eyes to think more about my responsibility and being held accountable to my responsibility to be that great grandfather, that living great grandfather who can sit my great grandchild on my knee and tell them some stories and pass down family history. We suffer in silence, and that is a cultural thing. And whatever the source of it is, whether it be derived from how we were indoctrinated in the weaponization of Christianity under the auspices of slavery, that's debatable. That's open for topic and discussion. But what is not debatable, what is not open for topical discussion, is the fact that if we are of age to reproduce ourselves, then that which we have produced can reproduce itself. And the cycle goes on and on and on. And we ought to be thinking about that eventual potential.
Can you say that again?
Which part?
The part that you just mentioned. If we can reproduce.
If we can reproduce ourselves, then that which we produce can reproduce itself.
Gotcha.
And on and on and on, right? That's how we beget generations, right? I am in the middle. I don't see myself as the start of a new generation, right? Because, as I said, I know my mother, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother. So I know three generations before me. I know my own generation, and I know the 2 generations that are after me. And I'm working to live to actually get to know, or at least see, that 3rd generation that will come after me, for a total of 7 generations. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. We have to accept our responsibility, and we have to be willing to submit to being held accountable to our responsibilities, right? For not so much the generation that came before us, but the generation that we are responsible for producing today. In holding my newborn grandchild, Liliana, baby Lily, I realized this more so than any other point in time in my life. You see, the purpose should be our legacy and the generations that are coming after us. Because again, if we can reproduce ourselves, then those who we produce can potentially reproduce themselves as well. Now, whether they do it or not is something different, but the potentiality is there for them to do it. And so we have an obligation and responsibility. And so in the context of 7 generations mindset moment, just think about your legacy, people, and give it more weight, give it more value, more importance than what we have been so far.
That's what's up. So yeah, my mindset moment is around just our reality. You know, our reality is that we don't have to hide from the suffering. We don't. We're all there. We've all been there. We're all there in some way, shape, or form, whether it is, you know, mental, emotional, financial, you know, there's just, it just is what it is currently. But I think that if we can be clear about that and get over those egos, get over that shame, get past the stigmas that we think are attached to those things, then I think we have an opportunity not only to help heal ourselves, but also thinking about those 7 generations, we have the opportunity to begin to root out that trauma so that it's not passed on to our next generation and our next generation and our next generation. And so, I'm gonna keep walking in my truth. You said something earlier, Theo, that really kind of stuck with me, which is like what the public persona is versus, what the private reality is. And I think we have to start living in the reality. And that's something that I've always tried to do. I spoke to that before. When I first started going live on Facebook, I was doing this series called My Journey Towards Success, because what I felt like was people get successful and all we see is the success, and we don't see all the ups and downs and how they got there. And we could listen to their story. You look at Tyler Perry, no one is really, really hearing the Tyler Perry saying, I slept in my car. No one is really listening to the fact that he's saying I was homeless in order to get here, right? And we just see where he is today. And I wanted to tell a different story. Like, I didn't know what the story was going to look like. I was telling it as it was happening. And, for my part, when people see me and say, or, see whatever it is that they see when they see me as capable, see me as, strong, or whatever the, very flattering words that Theo used, I want people to know that I have a story, that I didn't get here on my own, and that I also have, went through trials and tribulations in order to get here, right? And I think if we not only acknowledge those stories when we come out on the other end of them, but are okay to talk about them while we're going through them, and not feel the shame. Like, I don't feel any shame that I got myself into that debt. I don't feel any shame that I finally said, hey, I need help. I don't feel shame about that, because the way that I'm standing here today is a testament of the fact that I overcame those issues and overcame those traumas, and that I sought help for them instead of deciding to go, to the grave trying to carry whatever, shame or whatever that somebody else would try to attach to me. I don't live in that shame. So I think we have to spend, the vast majority of our time not nurturing our public image, but living in our private reality and being okay that this is what the reality is in order for us to heal. So we miss you, Shay, but that is it. That's episode 6 of season 4.
Hey, hurry up and get back, because Jice is aiming for your job, homegirl. So
I'm not
play around wherever you are if you want to.
I don't want this job, Shay. Come back. All right, y'all. That is it for 7 Generations Black. You know what it is. Make sure that you like, make sure that you subscribe, make sure that you share, make sure that you are supporting independent Black media so that we can continue to have these conversations that we need. We have one more episode coming up in this season, so tune back in next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Mountain. That's 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure you super chat us up. Make sure that you donate to the platform. Keep us going. And until then, hustle for your 7 Generations Black.